into the first panel of the day that is looking into like nature-based solutions and the innovations for climate action in the whole EU-China collaboration. We have 4 speakers, all of them from the European Commission with us. 2 of them, as I said, here in person, and 2 of them online. And I would like already to start with Marco Fritz, who is the Deputy Head of the Unit on Climate and Planetary Boundaries at the Directorate General for Research and Innovation. So Marco is here with us. So Marco, welcome. And we would like, of course, we're very happy that you're here. We would like also to hear from you on how we can accelerate nature-based solutions in cities and regions, and also like to link the work that you are doing also now in the mission for adaptation to climate change. So the floor is yours. Welcome. Yep. Yep.
Thank you. Good morning to everybody. Very pleased to be here. I think the best thing to start is, because I do remember when we started to think about this call, which was then published in 2018, in 2016 and 17, on how we could look at nature-based solutions, and in the cooperation with China and Europe. I do remember that we have seen the sponge cities in China, and we are thinking, oh, how can we make what we have developed since 2-3 years before in Europe on nature-based solutions in projects, and bring them together with what the Chinese experience was. And now we see, a few years later, in 2023, we see, after what has been said, it was sometimes an easy, sometimes a bumpy ride. We see now the results, and I think what I understand is that both projects, REGREEN and Clearing House, will deliver and are delivering very good results. And all of this is happening in a world which has changed very much on what we had in 2017-18. And in 2000, I want to give you a wider policy context on this, what was there. So we had the EU-China relations, and we had research and innovation defined in the 2019 a strategic outlook communication on the global approach to research and innovation, and where we have decided that we would like to have for engaging in these global challenges as we have for climate change and biodiversity and urbanization. Flagship initiatives such as now at the head for food, agriculture, climate change and biodiversity. So I think one of the major things we can learn here is that the cooperation between the EU and between China has been very productive. We can learn a lot from each other, and it's interesting to see through these 2 projects where we have very similar views, where we have different views, where we can learn from each other, and this is always very, very instructive. And what I would think what this conference could give to us, as it in any good scientific process, we can really see a good analysis. What is the success? What did work well? What did work less well, etc. So that is something what we want to see coming out under which, amongst others, from which conference where you discuss with each other what are the lessons learned, what are the good results, and then we look back into what would we do next. As well, in a sense, on the cooperation on nature-based solutions. So we will certainly continue the knowledge exchange, we will continue the networking. That will be a very big component of the relationship between the EU and China in research. We will continue as well to welcome the Chinese partners in the research projects, and where we speak about very much on the fundamental research. We will also look further the EU-China flagship initiatives, and we will further see how we can further develop this joint roadmap for the future in the EU and China cooperation on science, technology, and innovation. And I'm glad that we have a very, what I would call a joint attendance here from colleagues from China, who I to remember when these projects did develop, I remember at the beginning it was a bit difficult, and I'm very pleased that with all the efforts which were done there, we could get a really good cooperation here for these two projects on the academic level and on the ground. And I come now to the ground, and that is where I linked a bit to what we have said on the mission adaptation. So these projects were put in our research program Horizon 2020, which was then followed by a new research program which we are still in, which is called Horizon Europe, starting in 2020-21, and where we have introduced a new tool, and this new tool is the missions. And missions, we have at the moment 5 of them, are really what we call a kind of very big tools, very big initiatives. Each of them has about 1 billion euro to get some demonstration on the ground as well, in laboratories with the people on the ground. And there is a mission on adaptation to climate change, which has at this very moment about 350 partners who have signed the mission charter. There is, and they do a bit similar to what you have done here in this project, but on a bigger scale, helping the regions and the people on the local ground on demonstrating what research can really help us, in that case, on adaptation. And in this adaptation part, nature-based solutions, as we are working on climate mitigation, on adaptation, on biodiversity, on social, etc., and you will all go through this in this conference. The mission adaptation has as one of the key components nature-based solutions in it. So what you're doing here, the mission adaptation, is learning from as well what you're doing here. So these are really the idea is to bring together not only in the mission adaptation, not only research, but also other funding, and that is the new thing and the difference to a normal research projects is funding from regional funding, funding from life funding, so all these different EU funding streams to put together to the service of the people who are doing these very specific solutions on the ground, and here we speak about nature-based solutions. So again, we have put NBS very central in this mission as a central tool. We use the way how we do develop this mission is as well through calls, and we have put very specific topics in these calls through Horizon Europe for the mission for the deployment of nature-based solutions. And for example, we know that the mission at this very moment is funding already 7 big demonstration projects to have a budget of about 140 million euro. And these are really doing this demonstration on the ground. What I need to say is at this moment, the mission adaptation is really testing and applying these solutions in Europe. It is not an international part, it's really adaptation mission is Europe. Once these projects are running, because we are just starting of them, once we are delivering results, then we will open it up in a sense on networking with other countries outside Europe, and we will opening up in a sense of exchanging information and so on. But at this very moment, the mission adaptation is a very European initiatives. So it is really yes, putting what you are doing in your 2 projects on a bigger scale in Europe. And putting NBS, one of the major parts we need to do at this very moment is really to mainstream them into the different policies. And that is also what we try to do with the mission here. The mission adaptation is putting it into the adaptation policies. We have for more missions, and one of them is called the mission cities. So, and of course, it makes no sense to work with them individually and in parallel. So here we have nature-based solutions in urban areas. And of course, what we do with mission cities is, which is much more on mitigation and on adaptation, we are jointly funding projects, again, on nature-based solutions to climate mitigation and resilience in cities. And they have a budget of 35 million euros. So all of this is still a key element of a European Green Deal, and that is important to recall. That we have these green transitions, and we want to put them, all of them together. So they will learn from you, because you are the first ones, and at one moment I hope that these missions will give back the lessons learned to people really on the ground. I stop here, and when we have more time for the discussion, I think that's much more interesting than learning to me. What I want to say, one thing before I stop, is really I want to congratulate you. I think it's impressive that we are all here now at this moment. I think it's a celebration what you should do as well, and you will do specifically. So one of them is to very carefully look at the lessons learned, but then celebrate yourself as well. I mean, you had a long journey until here, so the project has been prolonged as well. So really celebrate as well what you have achieved here, and make the people are now around now through the different networking initiatives. We speak about this later as well. What you have achieved and what you've done. So celebrate. Congratulations from my part. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Marco. Yeah, take a seat, and then we will come back to the panel after we have heard from all the speakers. So I would like now to mix it up a bit, to move to one of our online speakers. So we have Karin Zauberger with us from DG Environment. And let's see also how this will work now. So basically, Karin is a policy officer and the Director General for the Environment of the European Commission at the Unit F3. And with Karin, we're going to look more through her speech into how we can emphasize on the ecosystem restoration and biodiversity conservation. This is also something that both the projects are putting quite high in their agenda the last 4 years. So Karin, yeah, great. It almost worked. Yes, there. We can see you. Let's see if we can hear you also.
Yeah, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Good morning, colleagues. And first of all, I had my apologies for not being here in person. I really wanted to do so, and eventually it didn't work out. The more I'm grateful to the organizers who made it possible to allow me to say a few words, online. So, I would like to talk a bit about the urgency and the opportunity and the importance for societies when we speak about nature-based solutions. Science has been clear over several years, if not decades. IPCC and IPBES together, they really made it clear that climate change and biodiversity loss are interdependent and can only be addressed in an integrated manner, only be addressed together. If we try to do this in isolation, we will fail on both. They also made it clear that each decimal degree of warming matters. Each year, each decision matters. So this makes this crucial, this decade very crucial, because we can observe several of the changes are actually unfolding faster than expected in the models. And also the pandemic has actually shown how crucial nature is, not only for our physical health, but also for our mental health. So in a way, we had it in recovery plans and so on. And still, unfortunately,
Yeah, it was too good to be true. Let's see. Let's try to fix this for a moment.
Time. We continue to discuss, we assess the risks, the cost efficiency and all that. And all this is super important. We try to make projects of nature-based solutions bankable, and we look at the cost efficiency. And all this is super important, but so much more important is it to look at the multi-benefits for nature, people and climate that we can harness through these nature-based solutions when we implement them in a rural and, the more important, also in the urban setting. that brings me to the social role of nature-based solutions, because it's about working with nature, with people. It brings jobs and business opportunities, and it enables people to be part of the solution. I think you have been working on the ground in China and in the European Union. You have seen this in working, and it also makes it so important that we should not forget that the narrow growth paradigm is actually part of the problem. As long as if we only look at the cost efficiency in terms of money, then we lose out a lot of the benefits. So we have to lose, but of course, we have to make projects more bankable, but we also have to see that there are many benefits which cannot be expressed and maybe never being expressed in money terms, but they are so important. The social role of nature-based solutions is extremely important. And still, if we look at climate action, for example, this will come very high on the agenda in the next 2 weeks. There we can actually, unfortunately, see what sometimes can happen if we look through a very narrow climate and economic lens. When we see natural solutions, I don't want to call them I don't want to call them nature-based solutions, when they are implemented for net carbon neutral strategies, and not looking at the environmental safeguards, not looking at social safeguards. And I mean, some of you might have seen or might have heard about what happened earlier this year in New Zealand when a cyclone hit, and many of these big monoculture plantations of pine trees that have been actually planted also for carbon neutral strategies of New Zealand have just been devastated, and it led to devastation in many areas that had really nothing to do with it. So we need to really look at the environmental and the social safeguards. So I'm really encouraged by the fact that the 3 COP presidents, meaning China, Egypt, and the Côte d'Ivoire, had made a joint declaration where they insist on the importance to work with nature. They insist on the importance on collaboration. They look for a united approach to address climate change and biodiversity loss. And I really keep fingers crossed that the next 2 weeks will really show in the outcome of COP28 that this appeal of the 3 COP presidents has been heard. Thank you very much. And I'm looking forward to some questions. Thanks again.
Thanks a lot, Karin. We're gonna leave you alone for a moment there until we hear from all the speakers, and then we will have a hybrid panel for all the 4 of you. So I would like then to move to our next speaker, who is also online. So we have with us Vojko Vratina. He's International Relations Officer and Policy Officer at Science and Technology at ATSE, at the delegation of the European Union to China. So, and Vojko, great that you are with us online. We can see you, and we can also like now we're gonna hear also like from you on how basically a bit like more into like how it is. How it has been to build this global cooperation for climate and biodiversity between Europe and China, and also like that you can share a bit more of your experience with us. So the floor is yours. We can see you. Let's see if we can hear you also. Almost. Okay. It's frozen for a moment. I'm sure, is it working? No? Okay.
Recording in progress.
Yeah, these technical issues in all the events, without them, I don't think that we're going to have any successful event anyway. So I think it's good to embrace them somehow. Okay, Vojko, we had some issues, but I think we're getting you back soon. There. Royko, I don't know if you can hear us.
Okay, I can see and hear you now. Do you me?
Great, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, we lost you for a moment, but now you're back, so the floor is yours. I shouldn't say that again. It's like, that's it. That's the trick. Yeah, but I don't think he can hear us now. Yes. Yeah.
Let's hope that works now. Can you
Yes.
hear me?
Yes, it works. You know, I don't want to speak. You know? It's like,
Not interrupting somehow, send me a message or whatever. So I heard what my colleagues said, and I will not repeat what they already said. Indeed, we are observing that EU and China are discussing several initiatives in key areas to build global cooperation for climate and biodiversity. At the end of the game, they have kind of similar strategies to align goals, policies, and actions, and they also recognize the importance of preserving biodiversity ecosystems, focusing on conservation, protecting wildlife, and things like that. And I have to note that this goodwill from both sides has been clearly demonstrated in the last months when several high-level meetings and discussions were conducted in person to exchange views and seek common ground on key environmental challenges. And we can see that this goodwill is translating into more concrete actions to enhance the impact of research initiatives in addressing climate change and promoting nature-based solutions. We can start right from the two projects organizing this event. These two projects funded of Chinese participants involved in the project. The projects were funded under one specific topic of the flagship initiative on environmental sustainable urbanization, which was set with China under H2020 to address specifically regeneration of urban ecosystem through nature-based solutions. This couple of twin projects is not the only example. Currently, there's another, again, co-funded by most, to supplement management in agriculture. We are speaking here of initiatives on food, agriculture, and biotechnology, and they started under Horizon 2020 already as a flagship initiative, but this flagship initiative was renewed as well under Horizon Europe. And I would like here to
okay. Let's maybe give it a last try.
Sorry. If you want to hear what is being said, you can choose channel 1 on your device. The audio is transmitted perfectly through the device.
Okay.
Or channel 2 for Chinese. Thank you. Sorry for the...
That's good. Yeah. Yeah, just connect your devices. Channel 1 English, channel 2 Chinese.
free.
Recording in
Then the
progress.
cooperation is limited to specific sectors where we want to cooperate. The cooperation is not just symbolic.
Works? No.
Recording in progress.
From a project has to be in open access modality, and this drags the corresponding Chinese part through joint publications to improve their open science practice. So they contribute further to the internalization of Chinese science. And then as the last point, I will spend a couple of words about potential future opportunities. What are the future perspectives? Well, concerning the cooperation, first of all, I have to say that hello, I see I'm back. I don't know where you lost me.
Yeah, we had a very interrupted connection. Maybe, yeah, I don't know if you, now it seems to be work if you have like a final statement, and then I guess we can also like maybe move it, we can take it more in the questions. I'm sure that there will be questions to you, but potentially you have already said these things, but we couldn't hear them.
So the important message is that cooperation with China works very well if some flagship initiatives in selected topics are established. So you have the political commitment mediated through experts that discuss together, define the topics. It creates building a kind of common ownership of what is being discussed. And then you have researchers doing the work. And in this context is very important because through the cooperation with European researchers, Chinese research communities are dragged into more internationalization.
Thank you, Voigo. The last part, actually, we almost heard it perfectly. So thanks a lot for that. Let's give him like a round of applause because, yeah, this has been like definitely a stress. So please stay with us, and then after we hear from our last speaker, then we can also like move into the panel discussion, and we can also like get the chance maybe to get some questions from the audience. So I would like to move to the last speaker that we have here with us. We have Benjamin Kasper. He is the team leader of urban environment policy at DG Environment, the European Commission, and also quite engaged in the urban greening plans that are also like linked quite well with the activities in our projects. And we're going to hear also a bit more about the urban greening plans and the EU restoration law. So, Ben.
Thanks very much. I'm just kidding. I'm still here. So, I'm just going to give a sort of introduction to our policy framework on urban biodiversity. And it's quite an exciting time for me, for us, for our policy. I'm going to start by just talking a little bit about how the policy framework on nature-based solutions has become more important recently. We've got, and I'll talk a little bit about urban greening plans, and then the really exciting thing, which is the nature restoration law. for us, for me, and that final vote is actually happening today. Well, there's pretty much the final vote in a parliamentary committee. So that's going to be the basis of my presentation. Nature-based solutions, obviously, is everything for me. I think we are nature and we depend completely on nature. And that has become increasingly highlighted with the Green Deal. So the last 5 years of my work have been, or 4 years, have been enormously supported by the Green Deal, which, as Karen said, represents and highlighted the fact that nature and biodiversity are incredibly important and they're part of the whole climate change discussion. Often I found in my career you have periods where everyone thinks that nature and biodiversity are nice to have, but not really so important as other priorities. And we're always shouting, no, they're absolutely, we've got to be thinking long term. It's always got to be a priority. It's fully linked to our economy, to our social lives and everything. It's not just some sort of nice to have thing in your backyard. So that's sort of the background, which is good news. Now I've got a technical problem, is my phone doesn't recognize my face. I'm an imposter. And what's also happened with the Green Deal is that the importance of nature and nature-based solutions in cities has been highlighted and has become more relevant. So the multiple benefits you'll all know about, that it's not just nice green spaces, but it's also climate regulation, heat reduction, pollution reduction, water filtration, flood risk reduction, as well as actually cities are fantastic havens for nature and biodiversity, much more than we realize. It's not just that cities are some nice green spaces and parks. The whole city is part of an urban ecosystem, and this urban ecosystem is recognized specifically in our biodiversity strategy for 2030. And in that biodiversity strategy, we called for all cities in the European Union over 20,000 inhabitants to have ambitious urban greening plans. And this is something we're working on. Our urban greening plans are what we're really talking about, and we've developed guidance for all cities that all cities can use to develop these urban greening plans. But it's about the process. It's about making sure that green thinking, greening urban development is part of all of your planning of your city. So it's a bit like a climate and energy plan or a sustainable urban mobility plan. It's very much linked to an adaptation to climate change plan, and it's basically about the process, setting a vision, where do you want your city to go, making sure there's a budget, having some leadership, proper citizens' participation, bringing all the stakeholders together, and then it's about measuring and monitoring, setting your indicators, and having a process where you actually continuously monitor and measure and try and achieve your targets. So we have now produced this urban greening plan guidance, and we're now translating it into all community languages. That's available for anyone to look at and use, and we're going to have an associated toolkit with that. So for each step, we link to best practices, link to fantastic projects which have been going on that people can learn from, etc. But the biodiversity strategy for 2030 also said, it reflected on our last biodiversity strategy, which is in 2020, which set a whole load of targets which hadn't been met. In fact, most of our aims and objectives of our 2020 biodiversity strategy hadn't been met. And so we decided to say, well, what can we do differently? We can't just produce another strategy with these targets and find that they're not met. And what we did is we called for, actually, that we said that protection is not enough. We need to restore our nature, and we need to have legally binding targets, not voluntary targets. So previously, where we had voluntary targets, and I was asked in the impact assessment, we had to look at it and say, why didn't the voluntary targets work? And I think the answer is because they were voluntary. But anyway, so now we've got a nature restoration law, and it is looking like it's going to come into force in around the middle of next year. And this sets, for the first time ever, I think globally. It's a multi-international framework setting legally binding targets for nature restoration across the whole of Europe. And including that is a section on urban ecosystems, so setting targets for urban green space and urban tree canopy cover. Essentially, it says that you can't lose any green space or tree canopy cover between now and 2030, and after 2030 to 2050, this green space and tree canopy cover actually has to steadily increase, an increasing trend towards what we call a satisfactory level. Now, we've still got to agree what the satisfactory level is, but it's above where you are now for all cities and towns. So we will be having, for the first time, a legal base which essentially makes it mandatory to measure, monitor, and increase trees and green space in all cities, towns, and suburbs. This will cover about 15,000 towns and suburbs and municipalities across the EU, representing up to about 20% of EU land. So it's a lot, and it's quite a significant thing. And I think the important thing to remember about this and how it links to nature-based solutions in cities, well, I mean, I think it's fairly obvious, but doesn't solve all of your problems for biodiversity in a city. Obviously, biodiversity is much more complex, much more intricate than that. It isn't the nature restoration law doesn't look at the absolute quality of the green space. It doesn't look at the connectivity. It is about the extent. It does look at trees, which are obviously a very high quality form of green space. But what it will do is mean that where up until now, maybe you've had the front runners improving their green space, thinking about their green space, monitoring it, measuring it. Now everybody is going to be doing it. It's going to become, from the middle of next year onwards, universal practice. And it is going to be the biggest, I think, boost and promotion to nature-based solutions in cities that we've seen for a long time, because now lots of people are going to be turning to the different research projects that have been going on, the different best practices, and saying, okay, we've got to increase our green space. How should we do it? What are these nature-based solutions? What can we do? How can we implement them well? How can we do it cost-effectively? And how can we sort of move this policy forward? So I think it's pretty exciting time, and let's watch this space, and we'll see how it gets implemented beginning of next year, middle of next year. Thanks.
Thank you. That's actually like very promising, very inspiring, and good luck also with the last part of the vote today. Yeah, thanks. We were a bit behind the time, but I have a couple of questions for our speakers, and then of course you can already start thinking about the questions that you want to ask, because we will have a couple of questions also from the audience. So maybe to Marco first. So you talked also, of course, about like the EU adaptation strategy and the mission. And we know that nature-based solutions are quite highlighted in the adaptation strategy. So if you need to prioritize, what would you point out, let's say, as the most necessary actions to speed up the use of nature-based solutions in cities and regions? Yeah, it works.
Is that working?
Yes.
Many thanks. I will answer your question, but I wanted to say something on just following up what Ben has said. So I think the very good link with your project as well is that the nature restoration law foresees that every member state of the EU has to make a nature restoration plan. And this plan is said in the law text that it needs to be based on best available science and new science. So here you come in. So it is you can put your experience, your results you have to the availability of the member states authorities who need to make this nature restoration plan. So it's a very direct link. So that is, I think, is something which member states have not realized yet. So that they need to do and they want to do, and I think that is a very good chance to get these projects like yours having beyond what you have done on the ground as a very tangible result on the lessons learned, how this can be done in other places. And that brings me to your question. So what I think is very urgent is, again, this kind of networking and sharing results. So that is very, very important, because you're not starting from scratch here. We have now I would call it about, since the notion of nature-based solutions started, we are now reaching about 8, 9, 10 years of people putting this into the ground. We have made, and I go back to the mission, for example, in the missions and also in some projects we've looked with the front runners and followers, so that the people who have put this on the ground have taught other cities on how to do it, who were not doing this on the ground, but learning from the lessons. And this should be magnified, this kind of networking. So there are, of course, a number of tools to do this. We have the mission adaptation platform, that is in the mission adaptation where this can be done. We have Network Nature, and we will certainly, I think, here in this conference as well, a bit more from Network Nature, which is a platform which is indeed there to bring the community of practice together, and I think that would be something very, very, very useful. Spreading it, we also know that we have projects on education, so that the way of how nature-based solutions are put in the different education curricula. In fact, that is what we need to do for the future generations. That is very important, that we get the nature-based solutions more as a kind, not what Ben has said, nice to have, but it's really an important basic part of all what we are doing in architecture, in landscape planning, in economy. And I want to say one word on economy. If you look, the people who are speaking French here, this morning in Les Echos, was an article about nature-based solutions in France. So read this article. It is now hitting as well the economic sphere, which is very good, I think. So that is something where I really wanted to put the base on. The second one, what I want to say, what is very important is, apart from networking, is to make very clear that it has not only, nature-based solutions do not only have environmental benefits, and we have just a bit covered the economic benefits, but the social benefits. We will very much see that as the political landscape is changing, we can already foresee in any elections we have next year, and we had already this year, that the environmental agenda is not as high as we want, but the social agenda is very high on it. We very much see that we will get in a big trouble if we don't put a bit more our emphasis on to leaving nobody left behind. So really this kind of social benefits of nature-based solutions, that communities are engaging together, that that it gives jobs in high-skilled and low-skilled grades. And these projects like yours in the cities can really make this difference to communicate these things. I think this social thing, that we have a social and just transition, that is very, very important. That I see that we have not done as much as we needed to do in the past, and I'm very sure this will be very, very high on the agenda. And if you want to keep the green agenda, nature-based solutions there, that is for me one of the major points to do, really to go into the social parts of the social benefits of nature-based solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like maybe to ask also, I don't know, Karin, you should be able to hear us. So I have maybe a question here. You talked a lot also about like the urgency to act. So can you maybe comment a bit more on this urgency of the situation we are, and also like what are the opportunities, let's say, in front of us, and the importance of maintaining healthy ecosystems in consideration of our societies, let's say, dependence on biodiversity for the future. So how can we basically maintain our healthy ecosystems, and how urgent we need to act on this?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for giving me the floor again. And I would actually reply implementation, and the third one again, no, accelerated implementation. I mean, if we do that, then by learning, by doing, we will actually gain even more experience. I mean, we have done over the past decades, we have learned a lot, and in particular in the field of nature-based solutions, I think we also have accumulated a lot of knowledge. There's still a lot we don't know, and we still have to fine-tune it, but we also need to accompany our increasing learning with experience on the ground. And I'm very grateful for the developments under the European Green Deal. I think that has started a lot, and I think it will hopefully also just be strong enough to really overcome any resistance that might come in the future months or years. Because once you get into the implementation, that's actually what I hear from colleagues who are actually working closer with you, and I hope your experience, you confirm that. Once you are in the implementation phase, once you actually experience the benefits that the community themselves can gain from this, if the nature-based solution, if the implementation considers the social and the environmental safeguards, then we are into a very positive spirit. And I mean, as also said by the previous speaker, what is very important is the people, the working with people, for people. That it's not just about nature. I mean, nature will be perfectly fine with us or without us, but we need nature. So we now need to have to give back to nature. And that's also one of the leitmotif of the European biodiversity strategy, giving back to nature, giving more back than we take. And I think we are really at crossroads here. Either we really speed up, we get to a tipping point of positive reaction, or we might get overruled by the potentially negative cascading tipping points in the Earth systems. But I see a lot of potential possibility if we really manage to enable the people to also, because many people are very, in particular young people, I mean, have increasing anxiety also as part of the, I mean, all these measures, the pandemic and all, etc. And so I think by enabling people to become part of the solution, we really can manage to then get into an accelerated implementation and show that actually, yes, what some people who really think in very old, I mean, I do not dare to think outside the box, that we really can probably do a lot more. You can see many people immediately say, oh, it's not possible, it's not possible. And I would challenge them, try to do it. And I think if we get the people on your side, then, I mean, eventually also the political stream, the mainstream politics will then follow. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, I mean, it is also impressive. Like, I think we have like more than 50 nature-based solutions projects at the moment, and I think we're going to hear also more from the Network Nature project later in one of the next panels. I don't know if Voiko can hear us, and looking basically in all these upcoming initiatives. I'm sure that maybe you mentioned them in your speech before, but you know, with the connection, we were not sure that we managed to hear. But what, let's say, upcoming initiatives can be highlighted in this ongoing collaboration effort between Europe and China to foster biodiversity? So is there anything that you would like to highlight that is coming up, something that our partners here that have been, of course, very much engaged in this collaboration and discussion the last years that they should engage with? Not on our side. Internet is not on our side, it seems, today.
Well, I hope you can hear me now.
Yes, yes.
It's one point I was trying, that one. Can you hear me?
Yes. I think. Yes and no, yes. It's coming, but then it's...
Can you hear me now?
Yes. I want to say yes.
So one point I was trying to convey in my previous interventions was that at the moment, one of the main goals is to ensure the continuity to the flagship initiatives on climate change and biodiversity. This is until the end of 20, and it is in the context of Horizon Europe framework program. And the two sides will have to discuss the continuation flagship initiative. So that then new topics of cooperation can be defined for the 25 and then for the next biannual program. As I said, it's a mechanism proved to be very good to mobilize the cooperation among Chinese entities and organizations from EU, and it contributes to establish also open science practices in the Chinese research community. So it moves them somehow to a higher level of internalization. And given the ongoing global focus on biodiversity, I think we are right in time. It's quite understandable that two sides, EU and China, will actively pursuing planning further collaborative efforts in this area.
Thank you. Actually, the last one was we could hear you pretty well. Thanks a lot, Volko. Maybe one last question to Ben from my side, and then we can take a couple of questions from the audience. So you mentioned, of course, like the approval of the nature restoration law and its targets, that then it will become like legally binding, like to actually restore nature in our cities. So especially on the urban greening plans. So how can the urban greening plans best align with the objectives of restoring at least 20% of the EU's land and land areas by 2030, and to achieve the restoration of all ecosystems? So how does the work that needs to be done in urban greening plans connect with the targets?
Yeah, thanks. I think one of the really important things for us is to not, over time, develop multiple policies which put different obligations on cities which are not connected and are not coherent. And we're trying to make sure that all our different policies in DG Environment work well together and are coherent. So obviously the Urban Greening Plan guidance, when it comes to its indicators, they are directly linked to the targets of the Nature Restoration Law. So if you've got an Urban Greening Plan, you'll already be measuring the correct things to meet the Nature Restoration Law. I think pretty much any city who has an Urban Greening Plan will probably not find it hard to meet the requirements of the Nature Restoration Law to some extent. I think one of the important things that I would like to stress is that the Nature Restoration Law is not something in isolation. So on the one hand, we set these targets, but on the other hand, with the biodiversity strategy, we've made an awful lot more money available of the European Union's overall budget for biodiversity spending. So this means that if you want to green your city, if you're finding that greening your urban development is just that little bit more expensive in the short term, because in the long term it's not, there is actually now significant additional new funding available for that. So by 2027, 10% of the entire EU budget should be spent directly on biodiversity-related actions. And of course, all the rest should be mainstreamed with biodiversity. So Karen talked about all the knowledge that's out there as well. So we've got developing knowledge, fantastic research, and we want to keep doing that. With the missions, there's a lot of new knowledge on how to green buildings and build green infrastructure into your development processes. And then we've got the funding. And then I think one of the last pieces of the jigsaw in this case is that we'll have this nature restoration law giving a push from underneath. And I think if before you had been looking at an urban greening plan as a city saying, well, we don't really need to have one, it's voluntary, there's no obligation to have an urban greening plan. But then these national nature restoration plans are going to come and say, well, actually, you do need to look at your green space and your tree canopy cover, and you need to make a bit of a plan. I think that could be a real boost to starting this planning process. I mean, that's what we want to do. We're not aiming to stop urban development, because we can't do that, and a lot of urban development is needed. What we want to do is change how urban development is done and make green thinking part of that urban development process in the future. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Coming close to an end, but we can take maybe a couple of short questions. So we see one there and another one. Okay, you're the winners. So Marianne first, and then the gentleman in front. There is a microphone coming, yes.
Thank you very much. For Ben Caspar, a question on this satisfactory level of increasing green space in cities in Europe. How is that process going to be towards finding out what is a satisfactory level? I think the Commission and the EA are bound to do some guidance, so what kind of process are you planning? And then I have a question for Vojko Bratina. It's been a terrific journey to collaborate with our Chinese partners, but the process in terms of the funding has been very disconnected. So, for instance, in both Clearing House and REGREEN, our Chinese partnerships did not get the funding, even if it was a win in Europe, and we had to wait a year, and their funding was cut to about the half or a third. So that's quite disruptive in addition to the COVID pandemic we had. So my question is, does the new flagship or the continued, is that taken into account?
Okay, on the first question is how we set satisfactory levels. That is a very good question. We're just starting that process. Obviously, this requirement on urban to have an increasing trend towards a satisfactory level, that wasn't written in our original Commission proposal. That was introduced by the Council and then supported by the Parliament. But the process is going to be an open and collaborative one. It's going to start with the Commission, I think, presenting various options, saying what the pros and cons of those options are. We are already thinking about it with our sort of scientific and technical colleagues in the JRC and the European Environment Agency to say, well, you know, what is a satisfactory level? Is it an absolute level? Is it set according to the other, you know, relative to others? Is it set according to your climatic zone? What is a satisfactory level in Helsinki may be very different to Seville. So, and of what different types of green or etc. So it's going to be, I think, quite complicated. It's going to be some interesting discussions. But the most important thing is that it's agreed, the guidance is going to be agreed by a comitology procedure. So that means that it goes to a committee of member states. And I think then it also has the opinion of a parliamentary committee as well, but I'm not 100% sure on that second point. So essentially, we're going to go through another sort of mini negotiation to agree this guidance, because at the end of the day, the satisfactory level and European law and regulations are implemented by member states. So they will set their satisfactory level according to this guidance, because that's what it says in the regulation. So we need to have everybody on board, and we have to have an open and sort of intelligent discussion about what is a satisfactory level. I think the thing I would stress is that the opposite of a satisfactory level is an unsatisfactory level. So if we're going to be setting something which is clearly unsatisfactory, then we've gone wrong somewhere. And I think the final point is that we need to come back when we're talking about these targets to the biodiversity strategy, the Green Deal, and what our aims and objectives are. We are doing this for biodiversity. We are doing this for adaptation and mitigation of climate change, primarily, and of course, also then, this is about all the different benefits that urban ecosystems can provide and all those services they can provide to the citizens of that city. Thanks.
Thank you. Volko, if you have like some response on the situation with this finding for Chinese partners?
Yes. I can. Yes, I get the question, which is very interesting. Well, the first reply is it was a win in Europe, but it was not a win in China when we speak about the Clearing House and REGREEN. At least on the first try,
It's gone. He's gone. He's gone, unfortunately, now, as far as I see in the back. I guess, Marianne, who will have to wait for that answer. But maybe the last question to the gentleman in front, and then we can close.
Yes, thank you very much. Clive Davies.
Once again?
Oh, he's back. No, he's not.
No. Continue.
Okay. Well,
it's always disconnected.
I'll ask it of Ben, because at least he's in the room. Ben, I was quite interested in a comment, and it does have a relation back to some of the findings of our projects. When you mentioned that quality and connectivity were not specifically included, this is a really interesting issue, because I think we know that quantity if quality and connectivity are not part of the equation, is not necessarily as beneficial as it can be. And certainly if we look at the success in China of their National Forest City program with incredible achievements in terms of the number of trees, I think there is already an awareness in China that that can sometimes be a double-edged sword in terms of the fact that just having trees in the ground is not necessarily the quality or the connectivity that is necessary. So really, I think if that is an oversight, and I may be using an overstrong word there, but if it is an oversight, is there an opportunity with the national nature restoration plans, which, you know, you reminded us that within EU, a lot of the decisions only really have impact if the national governments take them on. Is there an opportunity in those national plans to strengthen the input in terms of quality and connectivity, which I think you yourself seem to recognize as maybe a shortcoming?
Yeah, there is definitely there are many opportunities to develop policies and promote better quality and connectivity across the board. I think I mean, when we were setting the targets for the nature restoration law on urban green space, it was also about looking at how you could set a target that was legally binding for quality, and basically we came to the conclusion that that was going to be very difficult. We also don't have any specific sort of targets that you could set. I couldn't find anyone anywhere who could say, you know, could you have a legally binding target on connectivity, because it's very locally specific. The point of the nature restoration law is to set some sort of baseline, and then we have many other policies which can go with that, which can improve the quality and connectivity as well. So I think this is one part of a much bigger picture. Saying that, we are going to then have this discussion on what is a satisfactory level. And that is open, and that is going to be an open discussion with member states, and it will, obviously, the satisfactory level will form part of their nature restoration plans nationally. So I think there is an opportunity there to say that with certain types of quality or certain connectivity, your satisfactory level could be different from if you don't have that quality and connectivity, where you might need more. So I think there is an opportunity to bring quality and connectivity into the equation when we're discussing and developing the guidance on satisfactory levels. We're going to be producing all sorts of other guidance, knowledge, best practices, etc. And this urban greening plan part is only one part of all the other nature restoration aspects of the nature restoration law. Another one is on pollinators, for example. So we want to be promoting the types of habitats that will be good for pollinators and birds and insects. And also with the urban greening plan guidance, we have this focus too. So I think as a complete picture, it's more than just extent. But I am aware that if you just focus solely on one thing, you can head off in the wrong direction.
Thank you. And with that, I think we can close. Thanks a lot to all the speakers, the ones online, the ones here. Please give them a round of applause. And